What if I told you that successful people choose their life partners the exact same way they choose their business partners? What if the reason you keep ending up in relationships that drain your energy, waste your time, and leave you questioning your judgment is because you're approaching dating like a romantic comedy instead of like a strategic investment? Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. Love is not enough. Chemistry is not enough. Good intentions are not enough. Successful long-term partnerships require the same strategic thinking that successful businesses require: clear objectives, thorough evaluation, defined expectations, and the courage to walk away when the numbers don't add up. I'm about to show you why treating partner selection like a business decision will save you years of heartbreak and help you find someone who actually adds value to your life, instead of complicating it. By the end of this video, you'll never approach dating the same way again. Here's what happens when you treat choosing a partner like choosing a business partner. You start with a clear job description. In business, you don't hire someone without knowing exactly what role they need to fill and what qualifications they need to have. But in dating, most people just hope someone wonderful shows up and everything works out magically. This is insane. You're choosing someone to potentially spend decades with, share finances with, raise children with, make major life decisions with, and you're doing it based on butterflies and good vibes instead of concrete compatibility factors. Here's what a relationship job description actually looks like. You need someone who shares your core values about money, family, career, and lifestyle. Someone whose communication style meshes with yours. Someone whose life goals align with your timeline. Someone whose emotional maturity matches your own. The psychology behind this approach is simple. Successful partnerships are built on compatibility, not chemistry. Chemistry creates attraction. Compatibility creates lasting satisfaction. You can have incredible chemistry with someone who makes your life miserable, but you cannot have a successful partnership with someone whose fundamental approach to life conflicts with yours. Business partnerships succeed because both parties know exactly what they're signing up for before they commit. Personal relationships fail because people assume love will overcome any incompatibility. This is magical thinking that destroys lives. Now, here's where most people get triggered. I'm going to suggest you create an actual list of non-negotiable requirements for a life partner. Not a wish list, not preferences. Non-negotiables, the deal breakers that you will not compromise on regardless of how attracted you are to someone. This makes people uncomfortable because it feels cold and calculating. But here's what's actually cold: wasting years of someone's life because you knew from the beginning that your life goals were incompatible, but you hoped feelings would change reality. Your non-negotiables might include things like wanting children or not wanting children, living in a specific geographic area or being willing to relocate, having similar financial values and goals, sharing religious or spiritual beliefs, having compatible communication styles during conflict. These aren't shallow requirements. These are the foundations that determine whether two people can actually build a life together or just enjoy each other's company temporarily. Here's the business principle most people ignore in relationships. You evaluate performance over time before making major commitments. In business, you don't make someone a full partner on the first day. You observe their work quality, reliability, decision ability, and how they handle stress and conflict. But in relationships, people move in together, get engaged, or make major commitments based on how someone behaves during the honeymoon phase when everyone is on their best behavior. This is like promoting someone to CEO based on their job interview performance. The psychology of human behavior is clear. People can maintain a false persona for weeks or even months, but their true character emerges under pressure over time and when they're comfortable enough to stop performing. This is why smart Business people have probationary periods, and this is why smart daters have evaluation phases where they observe how potential partners handle real-life situations before making serious commitments. Here's what an evaluation phase looks like in dating. You observe how they treat service workers, family members, and people who cannot benefit them. You watch how they handle disappointment, stress, and conflict. You see how they manage money, time, and responsibilities. You notice whether their actions match their words, consistently over months, not weeks. Most importantly, you pay attention to how they respond when you express needs, set boundaries, or disagree with them. Someone's reaction to your boundaries tells you everything you need to know about their character and their compatibility with you. Now here's the part that makes people really uncomfortable. In business, when someone doesn't meet the job requirements or perform according to expectations, you don't try to train them into being a different person. You find someone who already has the qualifications you need. But in relationships, people spend years trying to change partners who are fundamentally incompatible with their needs and values. This is like hiring someone who can't do math for an accounting position and then being frustrated when they can't balance the books. The psychology behind this behavior is fascinating. People confuse potential with reality. They fall in love with who someone could become, instead of accepting who they actually are right now. This creates relationships based on hope rather than evidence. Here's the brutal truth about trying to change people. You cannot love someone into having different values. You cannot patient someone into emotional maturity. You cannot communicate someone into wanting the same life you want. People only change when they want to change for their own reasons. Your job is to find someone whose existing qualities and goals already align with yours, not to remake someone into your ideal partner. Here's where business thinking revolutionizes dating. In business, you clearly communicate expectations from the beginning. You don't hint. You don't hope people will guess what you need. You state your requirements explicitly and give people the opportunity to decide if they want the position. But in dating, people are terrified to communicate their actual needs because they think it will scare people away. So, they hide their expectations, accept behavior that doesn't work for them, and then feel resentful when their unspoken needs aren't met. This is self-sabotage, disguised as being flexible. If clearly stating your needs scares someone away, they weren't compatible with you anyway. You've saved both of you from wasting time in a relationship that was never going to satisfy either person. Here's what honest communication looks like in dating. I want children within the next 5 years. I need someone who shares household responsibilities equally. I require financial transparency and shared money management. I need regular quality time and physical affection. I cannot be with someone who yells during arguments or uses silent treatment as punishment. These aren't unreasonable demands. These are adult relationship requirements, and anyone who can't meet them or doesn't want them should remove themselves from consideration immediately. Now, here's the psychology behind why this approach works so much better than traditional dating. When you treat partner selection like a business decision, you remove the desperation and scarcity thinking that leads to poor choices. In business, you know there are multiple qualified candidates for any position. You interview several people, you compare qualifications. You choose the best fit rather than settling for the first person who shows interest. But in dating, many people operate from a scarcity mindset. They think they have limited options, so they try to make incompatible relationships work rather than continuing to look for someone who actually fits their criteria. This scarcity thinking creates desperation that clouds judgment. You overlook red flags because you're afraid you won't find anyone else. You compromise on important values because you think this might be your only chance at love. Business thinking eliminates this desperation by reminding you that there are thousands of people who could potentially be compatible with your Requirements. Your job is to find one of them, not to convince someone incompatible to change their entire personality and life goals. Here's what happens when you start treating dating like business. You become much more selective about who gets your time and emotional investment. You stop wasting months trying to turn casual dating into serious relationships with people whose goals don't match yours. You start asking direct questions early in the process. Do you want children? What are your career ambitions? How do you handle conflict? What does your ideal lifestyle look like? How do you manage money? What role does family play in your life? These conversations eliminate incompatible matches quickly, saving everyone time and emotional energy. The people who align with your values will appreciate your directness. The people who don't will remove themselves from consideration. Here's the most important business principle to apply to relationships. Cut your losses quickly. When the data shows incompatibility in business, you don't keep investing in failing ventures hoping they'll magically become profitable. You evaluate the evidence and make strategic decisions based on reality. But in relationships, people ignore obvious incompatibilities for months or years, hoping love will overcome fundamental differences. This emotional investment makes it harder to think clearly about whether the partnership is actually working. The psychology of sunk cost fallacy explains why people stay in incompatible relationships. They think about all the time and energy they've already invested and feel like leaving would waste that investment. But continuing to invest in something that isn't working wastes even more resources. Smart business people know that the time and money you've already spent is gone regardless of what you do next. The only question that matters is whether continuing this partnership serves your future goals. Here's what business-minded dating looks like in practice. You spend the first few months gathering information about compatibility rather than trying to create emotional attachment. You observe patterns rather than focusing on isolated incidents. You evaluate based on evidence rather than hoping for change. When you discover fundamental incompatibilities, you address them directly and set clear timelines for resolution. If someone cannot or will not meet your core requirements within a reasonable time frame, you end the relationship respectfully and continue looking for someone who can. This isn't cold or calculating, this is strategic and respectful. You're not trying to force someone to be different than they are. You're simply acknowledging that you're not a good match and freeing both of you to find partnerships that actually work. The result is that you spend more time in relationships that add value to your life and less time in situations that drain your energy, compromise your goals, and leave you feeling frustrated and unfulfilled. Here's the bottom line about choosing partners like business. Everyone wants something different from relationships. Everyone has different values, goals, communication styles, and life priorities. There's nothing wrong with having specific requirements and standards. What's wrong is pretending you don't have requirements, accepting partnerships that don't meet your needs, and expecting love to overcome compatibility issues that love cannot actually solve. Business partnerships succeed because both parties know exactly what they're agreeing to, and both parties get value from the arrangement. Personal relationships should work the same way. If this approach to dating feels too strategic or unromantic, ask yourself this: how's the emotional approach working out for you? How much time have you spent in relationships that didn't serve your long-term goals? How much energy have you invested trying to change people who weren't compatible with your needs? Maybe it's time to try thinking like a successful business person instead of like a romantic movie character. Subscribe for more strategic approaches to life decisions that most people make emotionally. And tell me in the comments what your non-negotiable requirements are for a life partner. Your clarity might help someone else get honest about their own needs. Remember, you're not looking for someone perfect. You're looking for someone perfectly compatible with the life you want to build. And that requires the same strategic thinking that builds successful businesses,